Welcome. I can see people settling down. I will briefly make an introduction. First of all, welcome to our exhibition launch and our mini conference. Thank you for preferring to be with us today in Istanbul. I know there are many art activities today, but thank you for preferring to be here. My name is Subash Bu. I am a manager in the art team of British Council, one of the managers of Museums Without Walls project. We're going to have two languages today, English, Turkish. So anybody who needs translation, please go get a headset in exchange for your ID card. If there's anything wrong with your earphone, again, ask for support from the people out there. In case of any emergency, our emergency exit doors are at the back. Please follow the lights. Of course, we don't expect this to be the case, but if you have a problem about health, Umutcan is at the very back waving. You can consult him. He's a certified first aid specialist and the assistant of our art team. All sessions will be live streamed on Facebook and from the exhibition webpage. Those of you who would not like to be on camera, my friend Mirel or Özlem, you can tell them and then we'll try not to have your photo on screen. Also, your Turkish Sign Language translation. Now, British Council Turkey Director Sherry Goff will talk to you about the project. Thank you again for being here.
And welcome to the British Council and to the beautiful Pera Museum. Everybody here, very welcome. It's great to see you this afternoon. My name's Cherry Goff and I'm the director of the British Council in Turkey. I think many of you are old friends of the British Council, but for anybody who doesn't know us well, just to say that we are the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and education opportunities. Our purpose is to create a friendly knowledge and understanding between people in the UK and people in other countries. And we do that by making a positive contribution to the countries we work with, changing lives by creating opportunities, building connections, and engendering trust. As an organisation, we work with over 100 countries across the world in the fields of arts and culture, English language, education, and social innovation. Here in Turkey, our arts program focuses on creating opportunities and enabling creative entrepreneurs and cultural professionals, particularly women, to fulfill their potential. In recent years, we've come to recognize the power of digital engagement and developing new ways of reaching new audiences through digital projects is a growing part of our work. In particular, we really embrace the idea that art is for everyone and should be accessible for all. And this Museum Without Walls exhibition has brought items from the British Council collection together on a digital art platform that can be accessed by anyone with an internet connection. I just want to say something about the British Council collection quite briefly. It began in 1938 with a few works on paper and has now grown to more than 8,500 artworks from over 1,250 artists. They include paintings, drawings, sculpture, photography, film and multimedia. So a fantastic collection. We enable their work to reach a global audience as part of our international exhibitions, as we did here at the Pera Museum in 2015 with an exhibition by Grayson Perry. I hope some of you saw that exhibition. We loan pieces to museums and galleries in the UK and overseas, and also invite curators from around the world to engage with our collection, learn how we manage it, and select works to display in their home country. So this Museum Without Walls exhibition shows how arts can speak to and impact societies by initiating innovative digital encounters between creatives and between communities using accessible digital technologies. We're very proud, I'm going to boast a little bit here, we're very proud that our first two editions, I Dreamed a Dream the Other Night and You Look Familiar, which are still available online if you haven't seen them, won 6 prestigious Golden Spider Web Awards last year, including Best Culture and Arts Website, Best Microsite, and Best Website of the Year. They also received a silver medal in the International Design and Communication Awards under the Best Website category. So we're very proud of that achievement. And this year, Mine Kaplanga was selected from 50 applicants from all over Turkey to create a new exhibition on the theme of woman. For the first time this year, the exhibition comprises of works not only from the British Council collection, but also works from prominent artists in Turkey. And in a minute, Mine will tell us about her Dances with Witches concept and the artists she chose and why. The Museum Without Walls was developed to make arts accessible for all and is a participatory and socially inclusive digital engagement art platform. Developing such an innovative platform requires innovative thinking, expertise, and great partners. This year, our design agency was IGOA. Also, Zera Technology, founded by Errol Tashkin, who is also one of our Nesta Creative Enterprise Programme participants. Errol audited the website's compatibility with accessibility tools and apps so that anyone using a special tool to access the site will be able to experience it fully. The Audio Description Association, SEBEDER, prepared professional audio descriptions of every artwork in the exhibition to make it accessible to visually impaired visitors. And Dilmatch, also here today, translating on stage, prepared sign language translations of all the audio text of the platform in Turkish and in international sign language. So you can see how we're trying to maximize the accessibility of the site. So today, we're here to launch the 3rd exhibition of Museum Without Walls and to share our experience for the last 3 years in developing an interactive, accessible arts platform. We'll be hearing from our 3 curators, Elif Kamushle, Ulya Soli, and Mine Kaplanga, in conversation with Ryan Nelson, British Council Arts Marketing Director. We're also absolutely delighted to welcome Joe Verrent, who's the senior producer for Unlimited. Unlimited is an amazing thing. It's the world's largest commissions program for disabled artists. And it's been hugely influential in changing perceptions of disabled people, both in the UK and internationally, working with the British Council as well as with other organisations around the world. So that's some background for you. But now I think we need to move to the creatives. And I'd like to welcome Mine, curator of the 3rd exhibition of Museum About Walls, to present the concept behind Dancing with Witches. Thank you very much, Mine.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It is a lengthy speech, so I'm going to have to read it from my notes. Welcome all to the online exhibition of Dancing with Witches. This is the third year round of the digital exhibition with the title Museum Without Walls. As there was an open call made for the curatorship of Museum Without Walls, the theme was determined as women. I know that women as a theme is quite problematic as I first heard of that, and I also questioned why we still need such a call. And the answers that I have given to these questions formed such a lengthy list that I couldn't even go over them again. This is the reason why I picked the witchcraft, history of witchcraft, as the theme for this third exhibition. I decided to focus on the representation of witches, witch trials, and witch hunt and magic. So this exhibition process has been multi-layered. This is most probably going to be the first layer of that for Dancing with Witches, and then with the comments that I will receive from you and with the further ideas that I will develop, we will continue forming further layers. British Council collection has been developed since from 1930s. It is quite an extensive collection, mainly forming a collection of artists that led their lives in the UK and produced in the UK. And this actually gives an idea to us about the history and culture of the UK, as well as the critical and interesting tips. And this was actually the most interesting bit about my research process. People that wonder about what exists in darkness, these people should not be stopped. And maybe literature and storytelling may be a practical vehicle in order to tell a story. It is about things that are not uttered, the things that people are afraid of. It is limiting. However, there is the question about the expression of that. It's a long list and it is multi-layered, as I've said. Nicola Held, dear Nicola Held and dear Sue Bashbu actually stopped me, so we decided to focus on 21 names. We have Roger Ackling, Robert Sargent Austin, Sir Peter Blake, Lynette Yadon Bocquier, Gerald Leslie Brockhurst, Alan Davey, Anya Galacio, Aubrey Hammond, Michael Landy, David Nash, Grayson Perry, Paula Rego, and Madame Yvonne. And additionally, we have some artists. We have been given the chance to invite some artists from Turkey. So we have dear Fatma Bucak, Canan, Nilbar Güreş, Gözde İlkin, Istanbul Queer Art Collective, Erin Seymen, and Pınar Yolaçan with their works of art. This year we have also, in addition to the art collection of British Council, we have William Blake's Enitar Mon's Night of Happiness with the former name, the Goddess of Magic, that belongs to William Blake, dated 1795. We had the chance to include this artwork to the exhibition as well. Actually, this initial layer has been formed with witches. This is referring to the witch trials that went on until the 18th century, impact of the executions, and maybe the reflections of that onto the feminist movement. And then we have gone through the artworks, artists, and practice in British Council collection, and then I opened up a new layer. Every time I encounter English literature, in order to find my directions, I always go for Virginia Woolf. And every time I read her, I am convinced once again that she should be read over and over again. This is not only related to the women's rights and emancipation of women, but also related to the rebellion started by women. And this opened up new doors in front of me. I also was wondering how witchcraft and witches may be handled as a symbol for power, and what would it mean to be a witch or to be resembled to a witch? We always hear adjectives and some metaphors made related to witches. So, of course, for the sake of this exhibition, I was forced to focus on Central Europe and nearby geography, as well as UK and UK history. We know that this has implications in various cultures in different parts of the world. So, taking this as the starting point, I can say that some of the artworks in the exhibition represent certain terms, and they also witness certain events, incidents, and stories are configured, and sometimes it is because of the direct artwork of the artists, and sometimes because of the potential that they would bring to the research. It has been extremely interesting for me as a process. We know that when there are times when wandering and asking questions are restricted, the severity of witch hunt always increases and enhances. So it is impossible to imprison them. This is the reason why it thrills me and gives me excitement to look into the details of witchcraft, other languages, other meanings, metaphors, as well as magic. I know that this site does not look like a conventional exhibition venue, but then again, my main purpose was to have the visitors feel themselves in a different environment, as if they were wandering around in an old story or setting, or they were as if taking a wall in the forest. We know that mobile phones have become an integrated part of our lives, that it's the first thing we check in the morning and the last thing we check before we go to bed. So this is quite practical to bring it closer to people as an exhibition venue. But still, we know that many people will not have access to this website because of the restrictions. But this year, British Council team made sure that the site is accessible to the hearing impaired as well as visually impaired people. So, in a nutshell, in order to tell about the main theme of the exhibition, you may have access to the menu under 4 main headings. The artworks are gathered, and for that, I'd like to express my gratitude to Igor Imalathane. We designed 4 different venues. You may start from any venue that you like, from any of the artists and artworks that you like. You're able to see the name of the artists, and when you click on the names, you will be able to see the details of the artworks, the visuals, the details, name tags, and the artworks themselves, and you may go into the details if you wish. All these visuals and texts are also accessible to the visually impaired as well as hearing impaired, thanks to the audio description used. You may have access to the exhibition either from your mobile phone or from your computer. I have gone through various books and resources, and those resources you may find in the library section on the website. You may also have access to the interviews conducted with the artists, and you may also take a look at the promotional videos as well as other interviews. This whole program, which will be realized today, will be available on the library segment among the videos. Now is a long list of things. I cannot skip that. The reason for the initiation of this research is my dear grandma. She is not with us, but if she were here, she would be extremely happy. And beyond continents, I received great support from my collective partner, dear Naz Cugoğlu, and I have also received great support from all the women who shared their stories, and I also would like to extend my thanks to British Council team. I would like to now invite you to the panel discussion, which will be moderated by the Art Marketing Director of British Council, Ryan Nelson. Thank you very much for your attention.
Very much for joining us this afternoon. It's my very great privilege to get to interview our 3 curators today. My name is Ryan Nelson, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Digital for British Council Arts. But you're not here. Am I on? Is it working? Can you hear me?
No.
How's that? Oh, that sounds much better. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's my very great privilege to get to interview our three curators this afternoon. My name is Ryan Nelson. I'm the Director of Marketing and Digital for the British Council Arts team, but you're not here to hear from me. We're going to conduct the interview in English with me asking the questions in English. Sadly, my Turkish isn't strong enough to conduct the interview questions in English, but our curators are going to answer in Turkish. We've got about 20 minutes of questions, and then we'll come over to the audience for some questions. So if you just wait until the microphone reaches you, that means we'll be able to pick you up on the live stream and get the translation as well. But without further ado, over straight away to our curators to introduce themselves. So if we start with Elif. If you could just introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background and your project.
Merhaba, ben Elif.
Hello, Elif Kamışlı. First edition of Museums Without Walls. I worked with the British Council team and Sue on that project. I'm the exhibition manager of Istanbul Biennial since 2014. Apart from that, I have different curatorial projects. I write about art. I'll talk about the project a bit. Maybe you have had a chance to visit it. I dreamed a dream the other night is the heading of the project. And when British Council made this call about the first digital exhibition, I wanted to apply. And in fact, I was in conflict because in my daily life, I don't use the digital platform. And for me, their aim in this, making art accessible, making it possible for people to experience art, how art can be represented in different formats. I wanted to think about this. I thought this would be a good mental exercise for that. There was no concept when I applied. So when screening the British Council collection, two strong wings of the English art, that's what I wanted to progress with. One was the landscape tradition, and the other one was the sculpture and the new applications of sculpture. These two basic art forms, I based myself on these, and on top of these, I built an idea. The majority of the exhibition, it was made of small-scale drawings, end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century. Artists who had lived around that area. It was a very, very unsettling time for the world. Right before World Wars, a group of artists who had taken shelter in nature, pacifists, all people against violence. That's how they positioned themselves, and their relationship with the world at that point was defined over nature and art. Literature is also part of that. Therefore, it was like I wanted to position them in a space like a circle, and then as interpretations of sculpture, land art, one of the pioneers of Richard Long, we digitized his work. Then Susan Phillips's sound sculpture we put in that space. Susan Phillips, when she won the Turner Prize, it was for the first time that an artist received an award like this with a sound sculpture. And I think as far as daily art practice, it was a breakdown. So when all that came together, a story was formed, and I dreamed a dream last night was the first sentence of Susan's work of art. It is love wins away. It is the first sentence of that. When scripting the space for the exhibition, taking note of my relationship with the digital, I wanted to make it as realistic as possible. Maybe those who did not want to go to an exhibition in their daily lives, they could just click and enter that space. That's what we aimed. Therefore, when you tour the space, when you go in a gallery space, it may be the gallery or museum, or when you visit the exhibition area, there's a film room. And I think in the film room, it's a great opportunity because normally a curator, when actually coming up with an exhibition, you may not know what she or he goes through in a conventional exhibition, but this is what the digital makes it possible for you. Whatever has inspired you, whatever has gone through your mind, those elements you can share with the audience. So we use the video room in that sense, and afterwards it's like going out of a museum shop. You could leave the space, and there the British Council team really were kind enough to give us some texts from their archives, especially about the historical texts. For those who wanted to read, it was a resource on the library shelves.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to pick up on some of those themes you've touched on, especially about accessibility. But Ulia, if I can come to you and sort of ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your project.
Ulia Soleil, Pera Museum in charge of collections, and I work on exhibition projects. Apart from that, I have independent exhibition works. I write about art as well in a variety of publications. In fact, I am very concerned with digital art, especially interested in digital art. That was my perspective in approaching this project. The title of my exhibition was Do We Know One Another? You Look Familiar. When a call was made, theme diversity, equality. Theme was diversity and equality. So diversity, seeing familiar faces, getting to know, feeling those people a bit closer. That was the approach I wanted to adopt. And while doing that, our digital habits and daily physical habits, I wanted to underline those over the portrait tradition. Here, of course, our current digital practices, we're encountering many faces on the social media. That had an impact. So, basing it on that, the physical things and the portrait tradition, how we could merge it with our daily experience is what I wanted to build it on. And therefore, in fact, different from what Elif has done, I did not want to look like a physical space. So it was a totally digital experience that I tried to create. And therefore, in fact, the exhibition is not like any space. Maybe it's like a vacuum. In fact, 360 degrees, a vacuum of 360 degrees. And when you look at the screen and navigate on it, it's as if different from the real world. You can, in fact, have full mastery over every area of that digital space that we have created. And so this is it.
And Minna, obviously we've seen your presentation and I've had a look at your exhibition. I'd encourage everybody to look not just at Minna's, but all three of them, which are still live and available for everybody to look at. I wonder, could you just sort of introduce yourself? But the thing I'm really interested in is one of the changes this year was the fact that it wasn't just works from the British Council collection, but it also for the first time showcased the work of Turkish artists. And I wonder, could you talk a little bit about how that sort of allowed sort of new conversations?
My name is Mine Kaplanga. In fact, for 4 years now, Block Arts-based Art Center. I worked there as an artist rep and a curator, but Collective Çukurcuma was a curatorial collective where I'm still working. Apart from that, just like Ulia, I also write in a variety of publications, especially I write about digital art. we had a very intense interest in that area. And I was keeping up with British Council. My biggest advantage is that I was fully aware of the previous two exhibitions before mine. I had observed, I had those examples before me. So, the third exhibition, Dancing with the Witches, is really something it happened just like I dreamed and scripted, I may say, because in connection with the theme and for the works to be conveyed in the best possible manner, we thought about creating a digital space, those dark forests in English literature, to be able to feel them so that they can draw the audience inside them. Sound design, visual, we thought a lot about this, and for the first time we had artists from Turkey apart from the collection, and for me that was really an exciting thing because I knew on my mind which artists could be twinned with this theme, how they could expand upon this theme. So especially together with the names, specific works of art is how I approached all artists, and they have supported and they accepted our invitation. So that's why I'm so happy with the outcome.
Elif, I want to come back to you and touch on this subject about you. Over lunch, you were saying that you're not sort of a digital expert by kind of your own admission. And so I guess I'm curious about the viewpoint you brought to this project, what attracted you to it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I guess whether since then that's changed how you approach curation, accessibility for arts more generally.
Mm-hmm. Sanıyorum bu proje.
I suppose what made this project an interesting one was exactly this fact, the fact that I'm not familiar with this very platform, and this actually forced me to rethink, revisit, and reinterpret something that I've been doing on other platforms. So throughout the preparation process, this was the most teaching bit of the process, rather than a museum. As I went through the collection of British Council, the sculpture, the paintings, other artworks, how can I reflect my experience rather than putting an artwork on a wall? Yes, physically we are able to experience that, but when you see it through a screen filter, there is this Verfremdungs effect or this alienation effect. I thought about that quite a lot. I reflected on that, and this is what really excited me the most in this project. I strongly believe that art is for everyone. Art is not to address the interest of a certain group of people. For me, art is entangled, and art embraces life itself. It is it's a practice that embraces life. So I strongly believe that all sorts of experiences that will take it to wider audiences give me great excitement. So rather than curating an exhibition on a conventional platform, this means more, and this has more value, because when you do it at a venue, it also has certain restrictions. When you have an exhibition in a certain city, whether you live in the same city to have access to that, sometimes we really want to go visit an exhibition, but because of the fact that it's in another city or country, we are unable to do that. So this is taking us through various layers. But when you do it on a digital platform, when you make the configuration on a digital platform, no matter where, it is equal representation and it's equal accessibility to everyone. It's all about storytelling. British Council is such a deep-rooted institution with such a collection. This collection tells us about stories of different eras and times. When you visit the collection, when I visited the collection in December with Sue, the person in charge of the collections was so happy that Those drawings on paper were kept in the drawers for the last 50 years, so he was as excited as I was. Each exhibition gives an opportunity to me to tell a story. What we do on digital platform is not exactly the experience that you offer at a conventional exhibition, but then again, it's a great value to take it to bigger crowds.
The idea of the digital space as a venue is something I think is really striking in this project. So even though the overarching project is called Museum Without Walls, actually each exhibition has a very distinctive look and feel, just as you would if you went to any real-world museum. Uli, I want to come to you on this and ask you, obviously you work at Pera Museum, and so I'm really interested to know how important do you think it is for museums, for real-world venues, to look at how they can, take their collection outside of their walls?
Yani koleksiyonumu dijital
Digitization of collections is a very important activity, and Pera Museum is undertaking some activities in that regard. Most of our collections may be visited online through Google Cultural and Arts. In addition to that, the inventory of the collections should be prepared on the digital platform. British Council is quite successful in that respect. And this is the reason why, as we were preparing ourselves for this exhibition, before paying a visit to British Council collection, we took a look at the digitized artworks so that we could come up with ideas for this exhibition. This is very important in that respect. And institutions undertaking activities in that respect, allocating budget for that, those are very important elements. And additionally, I think it's worth mentioning that artworks that are present on digital environment, preserving them, retaining them, and continuing with them is very important, because since they are in use, we may not be concerned, but some technologies will not continue to live with us in the future. So works that are developed on these platforms, how will these artworks be experienced in the future with future technologies? We have to reflect on that. Post-internet art, many artworks that are within the framework of post-internet art are not within the domain of institutions. So how will these be taken to the future? It's worth thinking of that as well.
One of the things that I sort of want to bring up, which I think is really striking, is, this is an all-female panel. It's an all-female sort of curatorial team. Panels have a tendency to be dominated by men. Museums have the same tendency. Tech and digital as well can tend to be dominated by, white guys who look like me. I'm really interested in, when approaching the digital space, do you feel like you come to it with a different sort of attitude or viewpoint? Do you have a different experience or challenges?
I wouldn't be able to answer this question only for digital platform. I mean, I understand the importance of this question, but then again, the main theme of this year's exhibition is women, and the exhibition is titled as Dancing with Witches. This is exactly addressing the situation and inequality that we see in all domains. It is the invisibility of women. This is how we configured this exhibition. However, when we think specifically about the digital environment, I wouldn't be able to say that I realized that on digital platform, because this has been a collective team effort. The team in Turkey and the UK have been quite supportive. The same rule applies to the artists. Since we are talking about witches, maybe the expectation was that all artists would be women, but I really paid attention that that's not the case. I wouldn't be able to talk about such an experience for the digital platform specifically. There is no such thing I realize in that respect. I don't know whether others have such an impression. Yes, technology, the world of technology seems to be a world dominated by men, but I think we are from the creative side. That's why we did not feel that in that respect.
Which is important, I think, though, to acknowledge. One of the other things that I think can often happen with digital is people and organizations can think it's a magic wand that's going to solve all of their problems. I wondered, were there any particular challenges or pitfalls you've faced when trying to translate or replicate real-world artwork in a digital space?
Belki ben burada
I can talk about the experience I had with Richard Longley. One of the sculptures in exhibition belongs to Richard Long's spheres. This is actually bringing together the rocks in the form of a circle. I really was willing to include Richard Long's artwork to this exhibition. His sculptures and his works of land art, those are cornerstones, and I strongly believe that he should be a part of this exhibition. However, although it was a part of the collection in the warehouse, it was somewhere inaccessible. So when I shared with the team that I'd like to add this artwork, I was told that it would not be possible to photograph the artwork. That was the response I got, because all the artworks that you see on digital platform are first photographed, and then with high resolution they are being transmitted to the digital environment. And artist working with clay and working with natural materials. So if you want to include his artwork, the only solution would be to recreate the artwork, that specific artwork, on digital environment. That was the initial thought, but we had some reservations. How would the artist think about that? How would it look like, the application? We had some question marks, so I wrote him a letter, and British Council team printed that, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to him. Days later, I received a response from him saying that I really don't know what exactly you're talking about, but I'm interested and would like to hear more from you. So with this green light from him, our digital agency started working on the digital artwork. So all the various angles of this artwork's photograph have been compiled so that a 360 degrees version was prepared. And then we continued corresponding with Richard, and ultimately we received an approval from him. This was such a significant experience, I should say, because this artist's practice is valuable to us, and his approach to digital arts, it was like opening the doors to a totally new, brand new platform. And I was so glad to see that he was open to such dialogue. Although he is from the creative side, still not everyone is ready for such novel areas. So this was a challenge, or let's not call this a challenge, but an adventure.
To meet him as well, you were saying.
Yes, evet.
Evet.
Kendisi
Yes. It was last December that, by pure coincidence, as I attended the Biennale, he was also a guest, so I was really thrilled to meet him finally, and I expressed my gratitude face to face. I had the chance to do that face to face.
You were obviously working with a very different medium, so rather than sculpture, you were focusing on portraiture. And at lunch we were discussing how with digital, there's that fine line between sort of gimmicky things. I wonder if you could talk about some of the challenges you faced and actually some of the interesting things that were built into your exhibition space.
benim için de aslında
For me, digitization of the paintings in the exhibition and exhibiting or maybe exhibiting these works of art on a digital environment, showcasing them, that's a challenge. I did not want any any cues or tips from the physical world. I wanted to position the paintings in such a way that they would form that environment. In order to eliminate that, I did not actually stay loyal to the original dimensions of the physical paintings. The whole environment is digital. So in this digital environment, there is no elements of the physical world, and the physical existence of the paintings were somehow eliminated. I also had a sculpture in my exhibition, and that artwork was photographed 360 degrees, and with the models we converted that into a video. That's how we showcased it. However, all these paintings and video and sculpture came together. It was as if it was floating in the air, and this was as close as it could get to the digital experience. That was my effort anyway.
I could ask questions all afternoon, but I think we should probably turn over
Yes.
to our audience at this point. So does anybody in the audience have any questions for our curators? People are being terribly shy. Well, while we're waiting for a question, I wanted to ask, does anybody have a particular favorite or surprising work from the collection that they discovered that they sort of weren't expecting?
Çok inanılmaz.
Well, that's a very difficult question. Well, for the collection, I can answer that separately, but the most enchanting experience was the fact that I could include William Blake's artwork. When I paid a visit to the collection of British Council, I had a chance to benefit from their library so that I could read about the artists whose artworks are in the collection, and I was able to find so many resources about William Blake. So automatically, I thought that William Blake should be added to the collection. I then discussed that with the team, and then I was able to find one of his artwork after taking permission from Tate collection. So that process was enchanting for me, to say the least. It was magical. But independent from the collection, being able to work on this exhibition in Istanbul, the first artwork that I encountered, I always had this theme of dancing with witches, and I was looking at the collection with that filter, so I was looking for artworks that would be close to that theme of dancing with witches. And Galaccio's forest floor was the first thing that struck me. That was the first one I picked, and I was really affected by that. I had read a lot about that anyway, so that was how I started my selection. So that I can mention that, not necessarily my favorite, but one of my favorites, let me say. And for me, British Council collection, prior to my visit to British Council collection, Madame Yvonne was someone that I knew, and I had seen her artwork. I really thought that she has this visual world, interesting visual world. Back in 1920s, 30s, she had established her studio in London, her photography studio, and at such an early stage, she was able to capture the aesthetics of these times at such an early stage, I would say. I would even say she was compiling and she was forming collage work that was striking.
To the audience and see if we have any questions. We've got one there from the gentleman in yellow. If you just wait till the microphone reaches you.
Sorry, no sound from that microphone at all.
Use this one.
Hello? My question, do digital curatorship practice. Its dissemination, a smaller budget, different areas, spreading over to those. Are you thinking about doing this? That's what I'm interested in. What sort of budget is required for that? What sort of a team works on this? I don't know much about this, but can this be repeated by smaller groups is what I'm interested in other formats, in other shapes, or in a manner that will support other media. Do you have plans like this? I think the British Council team should be answering this question, because they are the ones who did the organization. We just responded to their call. Therefore, we're here to talk about our own exhibitions here. But if you know, so our experience indicates something similar. When you have a digital exhibition, the audiences that it can reach is wider and more, and it facilitates other aspects of this thing as well. I'm sure if you want to reformulate this in your own area, the British Council team is happy to share their experiences with us during the cocktail we have.
Sort of speaking maybe on behalf of the British Council, one of the things that I think is really exciting about this project and worth drawing attention to is very often with digital projects, we build something once because it's shiny and new and exciting, and then we leave it and forget about it. And what I think is really admirable about this project is actually the team have continued to test it and iterate it and invest in it. A lot of the Tate in the UK basically thinks about their website as their fifth venue. And I think often we don't necessarily think about our digital platforms in the same way. So I think it's not speaking out of turn, but the team here is actually sort of really behind continuing to invest in this project and see, and my role is to see how, when we have a pilot like this that started in Turkey, actually then how can we as the British Council get behind it to make platforms that are actually available more globally? We don't have an answer to that yet, but it's sort of on our roadmap for actually continue, now that we know that we've got something that seems to work and strike a chord with people, actually, how do we continue to develop it?
Teşekkürler.
Thank you.
Oh, front row.
Merhabalar.
Hello, thank you very much for the explanation. I'm curious about the following. We're consuming everything rapidly in this day and age, and from the positive perspective, there's lots of advantages to the digital environment. But in the future, will this become a competition? Exhibitions offered on the digital platform, will they compete with traditional exhibitions? Will they be a handicap for the traditional ones? I could start if you wish. Thank you for that question. In fact, I don't think the two can really be compared, at least not in my own experience. These two I held completely independent of one another. In fact, as regards diversity in the area of art, it's valuable. It never replaces the physical experience of an exhibition or being side by side with an artwork. Experiencing the exhibition over the digital platform, these things will not replace one another or can be compared with another. I can create a new digital platform, but I don't think it will replace anything else. And I think because of that, when organizing these exhibitions, we always challenged ourselves, because we've always had exhibitions in the physical environment. We talk to artists, we experience one-on-hand. Even if there's sound, the impact of that sound wave on you was always considered when putting up an exhibition. Suddenly, you are just, using a mouse. You just estimating where the mouse will go. That's how you script the experience, which is a totally new experience. So not competition, but hopefully diversity. But definitely not the same thing. Maybe, okay, a small addition by me. Recently, in the world of art, when we look at where practices are going, I would say digital, but virtual reality. An artwork done over virtual reality. And art spaces turning into virtual spaces as well, but it causes significant investments, as we know. Nearest example would be the Stockholm Modern Museum director left to direct a company that will produce only virtual artwork. And for the world of art, that caused quite a discussion. An important established museum director, 7 years in that position, and this museum career, just walking away from it for just virtual, not digital, but virtual art orders. That's what they order, not digital, virtual art pieces. And yes, this is increasingly where people are focusing. People are curious about this. Daniel Bernheim's decision, for instance, the director of Serpentine Gallery, Hans Ernest, said, yes, it's an important area, and Daniel will contribute greatly to this area, he said. He said, we're curious to see what he'll be doing. As you have said, this will probably be more present in our lives. It will be converted into a media. But I agree with Mina, at the end of the day, the two experiences are not the same. The feelings and the things that they both make available are different. They're not competing with one another, but probably they'll be standing side by side from now on.
At lunch in relation to that was that, a lot of museum collections, 60%, 70%, 80% or more is actually often in storage and not available to the public at all. And it feels like actually the digital space provides a really good complement rather than a competition to those collections. You mentioned VR and virtual there, and I guess wanted to ask the panel, are you what new technologies are you excited about the possibilities with for sort of artistic practice and curation?
Over the past 1 year, I was wondering whether or not blockchain will be a new medium for art. I've been researching that and thinking about that, but the way it's been going recently is not that good. So I don't know if it will be a reality. There's interesting projects over the blockchain, and it is an exciting media for production and sharing. So that's it. Digital, even though, as I said in the beginning, personally, it's not present in my life, but in every example that I see, I can see infinite possibilities that it presents us with. Therefore, it's exciting, not just digital art, but the digital technologies helping the reproduction of some works of art, or maybe physically one day when it's no longer possible to store, or when they are gone from the face of the earth because of a variety of reasons, being kept somewhere as a resource. We know that all works of art in the Louvre Museum, their digital copies are being stored someplace, very safe box. If something happens and they are wiped out, their replicas, it will be possible to produce. So, of course, these bring about lots of other discussions, being unique. It's an important thing in the world of art. That's why digital art can be discussed a lot more than. But I think these are all very valuable things, to take ownership of those and to think again about, the work that we're doing. It's good.
Any other questions from the audience? I'm not doing very well with my props today. Thank you.
Merhaba.
Hello. First of all, thank you for this very good organization. Probably the exhibition will be a delight to watch. Mina Kaplanga touched upon the issue of censorship. That's what I'm interested in. In a physical exhibition, in some countries, there are attacks. Works of art are removed. In a digital exhibition, probably, this will also happen. Some prohibitions will be applied. How will it impact in general this business? As far as intellectual property is concerned, international rules are applicable, no problem. But will they be hacked by someone, for instance? May not be the case with this one, but in the coming exhibitions, you attacked Crown Princess something, etc. What do you think about this? Well, I can answer based on my own experience, maybe. Because the exhibition is scripted over a website, that danger is ever present. I think it is as applicable as the physical spaces. Exhibition on physical spaces, equally applicable on exhibitions on digital spaces. What I talked about during my speeches, especially some countries prohibit entry into these exhibitions, so it will not be possible to access this exhibition from some countries. So that is censorship, but again, maybe hacking or attacks on websites. Of course, it's British Council's technological infrastructure by British Council, but it's something that can be expected any time apart from that. We can't say it won't happen. Or we can't say it will not happen because of the content either. It's impossible in this day and age, I think. But what makes me uncomfortable the most is that auto-censorship. What I talk about with artists, with other people, it's the auto-censorship that we impose on ourselves, the reservations, not being able to be brave enough or having those rightful concerns. In total, this was the part that made me the most uncomfortable because there will probably be nothing and we'll be able to open the exhibition freely, but I think this is what all of us have at the moment. Panelin geri kalanı ne düşünüyor bu konuda, sansür konusunda?
Fiziksel ve dijital
Not big difference for me about between the physical and the digital about a censorship. Especially internet is becoming more and more sterile. Even Tumblr is finished because of that. Therefore, in fact, not much difference between the two for me, and internet is under too much control. So, digital and traditional art practices, not over those, but how art can assume any role in periods like this is what I will maybe talk about. Early period painters I have included in my exhibition. Their majority lived in a period of war. They were subjected to severe social traumas. They saw big deaths, big losses. Art or literature in periods like this really helped contribute when they looked at the greenery. That English landscape is a bit melancholic, but the hope that they see there and its continuity what attracted me, because for me art is something like that. In periods of unsettling in social traumas, these may happen, but art and literature always make the hope come back. That's how I view the world. That's the filter I view the world with. Therefore, when scripting this exhibition, I always thought how art can be a media for hope. That's what I tried to address it from. And I never thought about censor. I always wanted to stay away from negative things. So, even as a thought, I did not call it. That's it, how it is.
Any other questions? At the back there. Oh, sorry, they're not ready.
Hello. My question is a bit more from a different perspective. As a visually impaired individual, art exhibitions are not very accessible for me in general. Therefore, I really could not have an art taste until this age. Digitization is exciting me in this regard. 3000 BC is when writing started, but only the visually impaired in the 800s braille was invented, so we could have access to writing. And after digitization, of course, literacy increased among us. And I think this may be the case in art as well. When I go to a museum, when I go to an art exhibition, I cannot have access to a work of art by myself up until today. I wonder if this digitization, are curators taking note of this for a visually impaired individual when having access to our digital work of art, a definition of sorts? And are they thinking about this? That's what I'm curious to know. Thank you for this question. This year, to be honest, the British Council team, the other two exhibitions that they shared with me, I was inspired by those as well, and I tried to make the exhibition as accessible as possible. Therefore, for the visually impaired and the audio impaired and for easy reading techniques, we had special buttons. Every work of art of the exhibition can be explained or listened to, and or can be read. There are specially designed pages for that, but of course in exchange for that, as you have said, especially in galleries and museums, unfortunately in Turkey we don't have many examples of this, but I hope that it will be an opportunity and we'll see more examples of this in the future. As Mina said, this is something British Council insists on, and the Audio Description Association worked with us, and their works of art were especially defined for the visually impaired and auditorily impaired.
Hearing a lot more about accessibility in the art space as well. I think I saw a couple more hands there. One at the back right.
Wow. Merhaba.
Hello. Visualization of art data is
Basically. Türkiye'de bunun yeri
Do you think this will claim itself a place in Turkey, artists such as Refik Anadol? I hope that we'll be seeing more works of art in this area. There are many artists active in this area. Requires budget. Therefore, data visualization, maybe companies interested, companies with the budget may order works of art. If more of these are ordered, then there will be more artists, there will be more works produced in this area.
Right at the... Oh, no. We've got one here and then we'll come to you at the very back.
Hello, thank you for all these explanations. This third project of yours is what you explained. If art is for everyone, for their higher visibility, what's the roadmap you're following? For students in art schools, academies, and sometimes with artists included, they are not informed well enough about those. Do you have any project about visibility, about accessibility? Last year, for instance, after the exhibition was launched, we went to many universities to explain the exhibition. We talked about the exhibition, came together with the students. So in that sense, after the exhibition was opened, British Council did its best to reach as many people as possible. And I think that's why the previous exhibitions have not been closed down. This exhibition was not announced yet because it's being launched today. And then just from over a website, no matter where you are in the world, you will be able to have access to this exhibition. Even if it's not announced immediately, this will be, of course, spread by British Council and by us. So within a period of 2 or 3 years, it will be reaching thousands of people. We receive data like this. Plus, of course, the digital exhibitions that we organize. Yes, I understand your question. As Ulio said, we have visited various universities, but I wish we could have gone to more places. I wish we could have gone outside of Istanbul. So, about the announcement of what we're doing, maybe the social media channels of British Council can be used, but at the same time, conversations in the media about the projects, little small news, making larger groups aware of the project. I think
point you made, and you mentioning social there, because we haven't really talked about that in the course of the panel so far. And even at lunch, we were sort of looking at ways we might be able to sort of augment the project with a kind of digital program around it. So I sort of would wonder if anybody would sort of talk about sort of social in their exhibition and how, I guess, the voice of the audience can be included.
Ben belki tanışıyor muyuzun sonunda yer.
I can talk about the interface of You Look Familiar. Because it's an exhibition about portrait, with a formula that may include also the visitors. After the visitors tour the exhibition, they could leave their photograph. And for as long as the exhibition is online, they continue to accumulate on that page. So this was a simple connection that we tried to establish with the visitor.
Any other questions? I think I saw a hand at the back quite early on there. I think the mic is just making its way towards you.
Hello. Ike. My question, in general, works of art, the marketing of works of art on digital platforms, when you look at those as commodity, it has to do with the buying and selling of a work of art. Musically, on the digital platforms, Spotify, iTunes are effective marketing, and with membership, like you contribute to the artists, and then you get the accessibility. Same thing goes for Netflix, cinema works of art, or video art. Television series, you may access them and contribute by membership. So from plastic arts, an example, in an auction, for instance, you can buy and sell a piece of art. Can there be a digital platform, and through membership, could people sell and buy plastic arts? Do you think people will have access to those in the future? And if a work is produced only on a digital platform, can this be sold? And through what sort of a code? Do you have any experience about this, and what do you foresee about this idea?
As for the first part of your question, the websites are for online selling of buying of artworks, right? You meant that? Well, this is in practice. These systems are in practice for a very long time to different degrees. There are some small-scale sites, and then again we see the artworks of young artists. And then again, we see things like, for instance, I see it quite often in some magazines or some organizations that support artists or art. These are like non-profit organizations. They may sometimes have digital projects that they develop with real artists. Maybe to support those formations or those events, again, through digital, they may share this on digital environment. So that's in place. The second point you're making, Akut art, is what I just mentioned. This is exactly what they're doing. This is for artwork which is only in existence virtually, and they aim to sell those to the collectioners. I don't know what kind of a direction they will follow, but Anish Kapoor and Abramovich and some other artists are available, and these are experienced with digital goggles. But will they be addressing a niche group of people, or will that be extended to a larger group? Maybe Ulya may make a comment about that. Would you? Well, actually, at the beginning, the analogies that we're making may not always be accurate, like Netflix and Spotify, because these are platforms where you may experience movies or music. You don't buy them. On digital platform, on digital environment, you may experience many other forms, many different forms of art as well. But you don't buy those. You don't acquire those. But then again, there are various companies that work on the buying and selling of artworks. Silicon Valley is full of such companies, and it is it's an area, it's a domain where people invest in and investigate about. Blockchain is a platform which is related to this very activity, because it offers this, it promises that uniqueness, and it is quite safe. So through blockchain, digital art may be sold or bought. Many companies go for that direction, and they are integrating this technology to their system in order to buy or sell art. But then again, no one knows which direction it will head for.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right at the very back.
Hello. I'm wondering about the following technologies. As technologies develop, either online or on different platforms, they spend an effort to have access to different people with different attributes, like visually impaired, hearing impaired. I would like to ask you about the organization of witches. The organization of witches used to be quite chaotic. Maybe this has something to do with getting rid of the pressure. Well, it's not about the organization. It is about accessibility. We really thought about accessibility, because all the items that are available on British Council collection, the collection being initiated back in 1930s, of course it has a story. Of course it has certain subjectivity to it, like it is the case for all collections. In order to experience that at a museum in the UK, you have to belong to a certain group. I mean, even the fee, the access fee, may be a hurdle. So having access to art is a question, and we thought of this exhibition as a solution to that. So through a website, you enter into this theme. There's a text, and then there are various artists, and these artists tell a story, and then the rest is with you. I mean, maybe you will write your own story, or you will pick the story which is the most interesting. Hopefully you will all have unique experiences at this exhibition, but some will have an approach related to English literature, and some will associate the exhibition with censorship and auto-censorship, self-censorship. So they will have such a reference, and some others will focus on witches and witchcraft. So I really found it quite valuable to give that liberty to all the visitors, and I thought that accessibility will be facilitated. For instance, if you have a question, my social media accounts are tagged. My name is mentioned on various accounts of British Council. So I just wanted to leave an open end to it. It evolved in this direction, and hopefully it will be the case in the following process. So if we can organize and unite, let's see what will happen. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we have time for one or two more. Here, down at the front. We're making you work hard today. Just there.
Peki.
I'm wondering about one thing. Have you thought about children and the young people as you develop these exhibitions? Witches, because witches are quite attractive to children and to the youth. I agree, because it's a part of the fairy tales. Of course, I didn't have a chance to share with you the main text, but the myths and the fairy tales and the children's stories. I think this will be attractive for children, because I listened to these fairy tales as I grew up. So I really always found this interesting. So there's this fine line which makes it something other than being frightening. I can talk about Turkey, of course. I mean, there are certain similarities and things that we associate with, terms and terminology that we associate with, but then again we find it more gloomy, unsafe, frightening. Witches are found to be gloomy and frightening, but in English literature, unlike in Turkey, they use this as a metaphor. For instance, in children's tales and fairy tales, we see witches as the main character. So Peter Blake, for instance, Alice in Wonderland, the Grimm brothers, the Grimm stories. Hopefully it will be interesting, because I try to include them all. And visually, children will be able to experience this with the visuals and everything.
Often much more likely to be online than in a museum. So it's the extent to which spaces like this provide potentially a gateway or a starting point. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you for your questions, and thank you to our excellent panel. Join me in a round of applause for them, please. We'll now be taking a 15-minute break. I believe tea and coffee will be served upstairs. And then when we come back, we'll be having a great presentation from Joe Varant on accessibility in arts. So thank you.
Hello again, welcome back. As for the ones that were absent at the beginning of this conference, let me introduce myself again. My name is Su, and I'm the arts manager at British Council, and I'm at the same time the director of Museum Without Walls. At the same time, I'm a part of the team that works on global equality, diversity, and inclusion. We would like to make sure that our projects reach as many people as possible, and we'd like to make sure that cultural life and arts are not only centered in urban areas and big metropolitan cities. This is the reason why we'd like to make sure that we are accessible everywhere and by everyone. This is the reason why we make use of the digital possibilities, and it is very important for us. We at the same time have 2 languages at this event. In addition to the sign language translation, we make live broadcasting from Facebook Live. At the same time, as Cherry mentioned at the beginning of our event, For the first time, we have worked with an accessibility consultant for our digital platform. Now we are going to talk about art and accessibility with Joe Variant. What does accessibility mean? What are the features that make art accessible, and what should institutions do, and what kind of steps they should take for accessibility with the necessary infrastructure? We will be trying to seek answers to these questions with some examples. Why am I doing this panel discussion with Joe? Because Joe is the senior producer for Unlimited. This is in addition to the trainings she conducts, as well as consultancy she provides about accessibility all the way from Australia to South Korea and different parts of Europe. I had a chance to listen to her at a conference in Kiev last year, organized by British Council in Ukraine, and this had a great contribution to the activities we conduct for the sake of accessibility. Now let me switch to English, Sue says.
Thank you for coming. So I'm going directly into the subject. You are the senior producer of Unlimited. Could you tell us about what Unlimited does and what is your role there?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to Istanbul. It's my first time here, so I'm very, very grateful. I'll tell you a little bit excuse me, about Unlimited. We're a programme, we're not an organisation, and we're delivered by two organisations. Shape Arts, which is a disability-led arts organisation for disabled artists, and Arts Admin, which is an artists-centred arts organisation. So everything we do focuses on artists. Artists are the key, at the very heart of Unlimited. And what we basically do is move money into the hands of artists, into the hands of disabled artists, who in the past have had very little funding available to them. And we fund across all art forms. So work for screen, I'll show you a bit more of Sue Austin's work later on, in standard stage formats, in gallery spaces, and even outdoors. We're really interested in disabled artists having exactly the same access as non-disabled artists. So anything that a non-disabled artist can do, we think a disabled artist can do. Of course, we think they can do it better. We're funded by Arts Council England, which is the primary funder of artwork within the UK, and also Arts Council Wales, the one that's based in Wales. British Council have funded many of our works to help them tour internationally, and have helped us as a programme work extensively too. And we also have charitable support through a trust called the Spirit of 2012. And they're a charity that's very keen on young artists, on emerging artists. And we use their funds to help new artists get their first steps on what can be quite a precarious career. We focus on three things. And the first is high quality work by high quality artists. When we were thinking, how do we make a step change in the way that disabled people are seen in society, we knew that art was a really good way of being able to make that happen. But it had to be high quality art. It had to be art that people wanted to go and see, not art that people felt they should go and see because they felt pity or because they felt sympathy. We knew that if we wanted to shift the perception of disability, which is one of our main aims as well, that we had to do that through quality. The middle aim that we have is about embedding those artists in the cultural sector. We're a programme, not an organisation, as I said, and that means we're only around for a short period of time. At the moment, we're due to end in 2020. When we go, we can't leave the careers of these artists at sea. They have to have viable, sustainable careers. And the only way we can do that is through working in partnership with other people. Oh, what do I do? I think senior producer just means old. because I've been around a long time within the arts sector in the UK. And it's my job to oversee the programme, to work with my teammates based at both Shape and at Arts Admin, and also to oversee the legacy of the programme, which is why I'm able to take up opportunities like this. And I have the utter privilege of travelling to many countries to talk about the programme that we run.
So we went a little on about your partners in it, with who you're doing your work with. And do you work with others, or you do everything, you run everything by yourself as Unlimited?
We have to work with partners, not just the partners who deliver the programme, but there's no point in just funding artists without working with the sector as a whole. And when we started, it was quite difficult to find high quality partners to work with. People were very scared, people were very fearful and didn't believe us when we said the work would be of high quality. So we began with maybe 5 or 6 allies, as we called them, and now we have over 300. So the programme over time has managed to bring more and more names and more organisations to form part of what we do. We have a short film, but I won't show you all of it, but I'll just run a little bit of it, which tells you more about our Allies programme.
I did that. That's me, sorry.
It's the best thing about digital.
Unlimited Impact is about extending the reach of Unlimited, the main commissioning programme. Our focus is on supporting the next generation of disabled artists, creating new and exciting work. It's also about deepening the debate of the work, to really embed change in the arts sector and make sure that work is seen by the widest audiences.
Perhaps the most exciting thing about Unlimited Impact is not only that it works with young, emerging, exciting, disabled, talented artists, but also with the venues, the festivals and the productions that should be creating this cultural change.
With Unlimited, anybody can be our ally. It's people who align themselves with the idea, the concepts that we're working with. Through Unlimited Impact, we work directly with some of those allies to have a much deeper and much more thorough relationship.
We've worked with Unlimited Impact allies to really help them look at the accessibility of their organisation and venue and build their confidence to programming and working with disabled artists.
We had an audit of our facilities here, and it was pointed out a few of the quick win-wins. We could do stuff that we wouldn't even think of. We're a non-funded building, so working with organisations that know what are the small things we can do to make it much better for the majority of people is very important for us.
The best ever, I think, for in terms of deaf and disability art, thanks to Unlimited.
This is about great art that changes people's perceptions, and people are coming out really buzzing, and that's what it should be all about.
The 14 theatres that I work for, we're looking at creating roles within our producing teams, within our programming teams, for young deaf and disabled people to actually build up a pool of producers who are able to sort of go into theatres and basically make embracing this kind of challenge irresistible. These kind of discussions is exactly what Unlimited Impact was hoping to inspire and hoping to get moving. It's all part of.
Okay, we're going to stop that because what I'll do is I'll put some of the videos, and we have every video we do with captions, and we also do an audio described version for people who are visually impaired. So I'll put them up online, and then people will be able to, through Twitter, link to those and see the longer formats. But for us, working with allies is really important because it's the way the work actually reaches audiences. As a commissioning body, we can commission work, and I'll talk later about a festival that we're involved in, but that doesn't get that direct audience connection. That has to come through the venues, the promoters, independent festivals, a range of different organisations. who can take that journey further. But they've been really scared, and people have for years and years and years had this fear of disability and this constant assumption that disability means low quality. When I introduced myself before, I didn't say that I am a disabled person. The majority of people in my team are disabled people. And when we said we want to run this program and at least 50% of our staff will be disabled people, we were told, are you sure? Is that not me? Maybe 10%, and certainly not the person at the top. And for me, that just again reminds us of that fear that we have, that constant thought that disabled people can't really do things. I genuinely think disabled people can do things better. I mean, I'm privileged to be a hearing aid user. I mean, I can turn my hearing aid off at night and I don't hear my husband snore. It's a major evolutionary advantage. It means I can listen to the English translation without headphones. I just wear a neck loop. It's much more comfortable. I feel very sorry for people who are struggling with the headphones. And even things like I can't open doors very well, or I get very tired very easily. Again, for me, these things can all have advantages as well as disadvantages. There are very few people who can say, I work 2 days a week from bed and get away with it. Whereas for me, it's an essential requirement. And we look for that within our artists too. What is it that they can do which is different, which is fresh, which is something that we haven't quite seen before because we haven't heard those stories before. We haven't allowed those voices into our cultural spaces. And for allies, it's about convincing them and holding their hands as part of that journey.
Yeah, thank you for that. It would be great to see a couple of examples of general commissions that you do.
Okay, so what do we commission? So this is, we commission a range of different works. We also commission research and development work. We think you can't move to a big commission. And when I say a big commission, we might be giving out £80,000 to one artist, which is...
£80,000. It's a lot in Turkish lira.
A lot in Turkish, there we go. We were talking earlier, we're a very well-funded programme. We've had to really fight to get the levels of funding that we get. We run on just under £1 million a year, which is, in Turkey, I imagine, a really, yes, people are laughing. It's it's a huge amount of money, and we're really, really aware of that. But we commit to giving 75% of any money we get directly to artists. So the artists are the ones ultimately who benefit rather than the institution. So this was a piece that's currently in research and development. It's a big sculpture. It breathes. So as you enter into it, the paper cones move backwards and forwards. It pulsates. And it's created by an autistic artist who finds being at festivals, being outdoors, being at events, completely overwhelming, and wanted to create a safe space that enabled them to just take stock of where they were within those kind of events. And we've got a prototype that's developed now, and we're hoping to take this to a full build next year. But she has made every single individual paper cone, because part of her autism is an inability to allow somebody else to do any particular aspect of her work, which means the whole thing is so precise and so astoundingly beautiful. But that comes from her impairment. It's not a casual assumption. It's an amazing piece of work.
Can I ask something? Are they applying with the concrete idea, or they are applying and you're working together with them to develop the final idea?
So when they apply with an idea, we shortlist down to a shortlist. Everybody on that shortlist has 1 hour with somebody on my team to help them develop their idea further. And we also link them with different partners at that stage before they put in a final bid. So the final bid can be the best that it can be. And we work with them right the way through that process. We don't co-produce, we step a little bit further back, but we're always advising, suggesting, and we're not always the best people. Sometimes it's about connecting them with the right skill base somewhere else. The biggest barrier that faces many disabled artists is that lack of connection, that not being connected into what can be a very elitist structure, particularly within visual arts, sadly. So dance, we fund a lot of dance work. It's a very, contemporary dance is a very appropriate medium for a lot of disabled people, particularly exploring the choreographic potential of different ways of moving and different body forms. This is a piece by a dyspraxic artist who never quite knows which way she's going to go. And she duets with other things, like a helium balloon, that you don't quite know which way it's going to go. So her show has a balloon in, it has a lot of balloons, a space hopper. At one point it had roller skates, but yeah, she held back from the roller skates. Visual artwork, and again, we sometimes work in collaborations with other countries. So this was a piece by Rachel Gadsden working with a number of disabled artists in Palestine and along the West Bank. As mentioned before, work for indoors and outdoors and across the whole range of different impairments. So this is a piece about the weather. We're very obsessed. In the UK now, we either talk about the weather or Brexit. Let's stick with the weather. The weather and mental health. We always talk about, oh, I'm feeling blue, I'm a bit cloudy. There's a lot of metaphors, and this is a piece that explores those metaphors and opens up gentle conversations at events, rather than all conversations around mental health being very heavy or people being, again, frightened of having those works. Actually, before I show that, there's a little trailer.
Yeah.
Do you want to show, again, just to show some more of the works and the way in which we talk about them? Yeah.
This morning, the thing that woke me up was just excitement.
The whole project is completely outside of the box. People said it wasn't possible.
Oh, show it to me for free, Chris.
The idea was to make a show that will reach parts that other shows don't reach.
It is something that I think, have I gone too far this time?
So you'll see there that we're branding works as unforgettable and unmissable. There's nowhere in our promotional material that always mentions disability or that always talks about access, because we know from audience research that that's not the selling point that we want. If somebody comes in to see work by a disabled artist, then they already have kind of glasses on that give them an understanding of what they think they might be about to experience. And we want to try and find a way of getting past those glasses as we can. And that's why quite often when our work is programmed, it doesn't mention the word disability. There's many artists who just want their work programmed alongside any other work without that being mentioned. Our one exception is when we bring all the work together at South Bank Centre in London, which is London's biggest arts centre, which we do every 2 years for a big festival called the Unlimited Festival. Now there we do talk about disability because that's the curatorial fix, that's the curatorial element that's bringing that work together. Now that festival doesn't only focus on our work, it's about 50, 60, this year it was 75% our work. The other work is brought in from different countries, or where there's a gap in our programme. We commission work, so we don't automatically sit in a commissions meeting going, have we got something for outside? Have we got enough dance? Is there enough theatre for big spaces and small spaces? We commission the work we want to commission, and then with the festival, they look at their spaces and may bring in other work. But it's an opportunity for other disabled artists from other countries to also have their work shown within that space. This was a magician we brought over, a blind magician. We thought we haven't got any of them in the UK. We're really interested in what we haven't got. And we found that there was a blind musician working in America called Justin Sight. And he was great. He added something that we didn't have to the programme. Sometimes our artists could get quite earnest, and he added an air of spectacle and humour to the festival, which was really fantastic.
Great. Going back to digital, do you have any artists that work in the digital or that produce digital works?
Yeah, we're really interested, as I said, in artists doing absolutely everything that any other artists are doing. So we've got a couple that work, that I'll talk about in more detail, that work specifically within digital. So the first is Sue, who you saw before, and yes, that is a wheelchair and it is underwater. And you've seen a few clips in the promo about her work. And I'll show you a little trailer. In fact, if we run the trailer behind and I can just talk over it.
I think we can do that.
That'd be great. So Sue was really keen to, if we can just put the sound down quite low, that would be amazing. See if we can get it going. Okay, brilliant. Sue was really keen that as many people as possible were able to access her work. So it is a screen-based piece. It runs as an installation in gallery settings, but it also works on Oculus Rift. So it works as a VR piece where you can actually track her as she swims around you. She also created a portable 360-degree cinema, which she could tour to village halls in the UK, because she was absolutely obsessed with the fact that any person should be able to get to see this work, not just those who had access to big metropolitan venues or organisations. Online, we know this work has reached over 8 million people so far. It's featured on the cover of 17 publications, and she has gone around the world talking about her practice. She's a fantastic artist. You'll see she's not quite content with underwater. The next piece that she's developing at the moment is to turn her wheelchair into a flying wheelchair. We'll stop that because that's in prototype at the moment. She hasn't quite got there yet. She has taken her pilot's license and passed, and we now have to register her flying chair as a plane. We're 2 years behind schedule, but we will get there in the end. It's much more complicated than we imagined it to be. Very different scale of work. Another artist called Rhiannon Armstrong. And Rhiannon is fascinated by GIFs. So we use GIFs online all the time. They're usually very, very fast, bright colours, really, if you're over 50 like me, annoying. But there's certainly something my kids and my grandchildren are very, very familiar with. But she's got a very different take on them. Because of her impairments, she can't look at them. They're just increasingly irritating and actually quite damaging to the way in which her brain is wired. So she's interested in creating something called the slow GIF movement, which instead takes a moderated palette of colours. It looks at repeated patterns and looks at a different purpose for GIFs, actually seeing whether we can use them within meditation, whether we can use them to relax, whether we can use them in a whole variety of ways. And I've just got one I'll put up for a little bit, because she found a really interesting thing started happening when she started to play around. And again, this is only in R&D at the moment.
This one?
That one, yeah. So she started to just create little kaleidoscope type events, GIFs, things like this. And she's now creating them for hospitals. This one is about breathing, and it's actually being used with stroke patients to lower their heart rate. So rather than looking at an incredibly medicalised kind of chart, actually there's now an arts intervention that can be used in that way. And she's reaching a whole new audience, an audience that we didn't expect to be interested in or have a particular focus on art. But again, that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't come from her own unique personal experience of the world in which she lives. Fantastic. And the other thing we're finding in terms of digital work is we've started live streaming things and working hard on making sure our website is accessible and has multi-access formats. And what we're discovering is a whole new audience of people who in the UK we refer to as having bed lives. So people who, I mean, I said I spent a couple of days working from bed to save my energy. There is a whole vast range of people out there who can't actually get outside their front door. Not because of physical access barriers, but because of energy access barriers. They are a massive market, a brilliant market. It's making noise by itself.
Okay.
The work is so keen for you to access it, it's starting by itself. So we're increasingly finding artists who want to make work for that bedbound audience. So this is from a piece called Bedding Out, which was a piece by Liz Crow, where she took to her bed within gallery settings and live streamed her bed and her sleeping to anybody who wanted to watch her sleep, who couldn't get to a gallery to see her sleep. I mean, it was very, but it was amazing actually, that again, the conversations it started and also the interest that people had within the piece.
That's great. I'll go from a more institutional point of view now. What is the definition of access and accessible arts for you in general?
I think access is really interesting. We don't believe that everything can be accessible to everyone within the arts. So we think that artists have the right to, we think that aesthetics trump access. If an artist wanted to create a piece in the dark and that was central to their aesthetic, we don't think you could put the light on to see a sign language interpreter. But they would need to think of another way. Maybe they could brief somebody before they went into that experience. Maybe there's another way that you could do that. But we don't want to disrupt the actual art itself. So we do all the conventional things one would expect within a gallery setting. So audio descriptions for work. Sometimes we get audience members to record their audio descriptions as well, because they're not always the same as a paid audio describer. Obviously the heights of labels, tactile versions of work, even things like just actually having all the works listed on a piece of paper that you can actually take round with you. We're really keen that artists explore access as much as they can. And don't make the assumption that disabled artists are good at access. We have many disabled artists who are worse at access than their non-disabled counterparts because actually they haven't had the opportunity to learn either. And with performances, we often use captions, we use sign language, we do orientation visits to allow people to go to spaces beforehand to get to understand the layout of a venue and understand what happens when the lights come up or go down. And we run relaxed performances, which is where the lights are up a little bit, you can make as much noise as you want. So just because you make an involuntary noise doesn't mean that you can't enjoy that performance.
And how is the audience response? I mean,
it depends. If you're my mother, you don't like it. My mother is in her 80s and she still finds it quite disturbing to, for example, sit next to somebody who's making voluntary noise. And in that instance, we would apologise profusely to the person making involuntary noise for the behaviour of my mother. And My mother would be the one who would be removed rather than the other person. It's got to happen. We use something that's called what we refer to as the social model of disability, which is a way of looking at disability and trying to locate the problem, not with the disabled person, but instead with the society we create. And unsurprisingly, we have another little video. Oh, hang on, I think that's another one that's... that one. And I'll put the link up to the audio described version later.
Aha. Oh. Yay.
This is me. I am the pink potato.
What could the arts institutions or NGOs do to be more accessible, more inclusive in terms of audience and artists as well?
So we reckon that, again, we like 3 simple ideas. So the thing that's really important to us is nothing about us without us. So if you're planning work for disabled people, involve disabled people within that planning process, because we believe that we are the experts in what needs to happen. Social model thinking, so that idea that the problem is within the barriers that are created within society, not within disabled people. And the last one we put, think, plan, then try. Fail, then try better. Sometimes I think we're so frightened to do anything that we don't make a start. But it's much better to do something, even if it's not perfect, and then learn from your mistakes and then go on. That iteration that we were hearing about earlier with the online gallery platform. I mean, you've had experience of that.
Yeah, I mean, in the first 2 years, we were thinking that we were so accessible and we were so proud of it. But this year, really, it's the first time that we understood that we were not accessible at all. And I think that now it's accessible, but again, not 100%. But the most that we can do, we are learning.
Yeah, and it never will be 100%, but it's a great thing to kind of aim for. And we created a game, a card game, for people to play to help them think about access, called Cards for Inclusion, which has little pictures and very simple English words on. And it's a game that we played. It took us 2 years to develop, taking trial iterations around the world to help start conversations. And this is us in Tokyo last September, when we finally had the actual printed game ready to play. So it's a fun, playful way. We have sets, but also you can download it online for free. And that was very important to us, that anybody who wanted it should be able to download it and also alter it so that it fits their particular circumstances.
And the quality also is, quite important.
Yeah, for us it was really important that the quality and the illustrations, that everything was really as high a quality as we could make it. Again, because the assumption is that if it's about disability and if disabled people were involved, it would either look medical or it would look institutional or it would just look a little bit shoddy. And that's something that all the time we're really trying to kind of work against and actually show that disabled people can produce some of the most compelling work, whether it's a game or whether it's an artwork.
So the British Council has 2 copies now, so if anyone is interested, they can approach me. I think we're quite okay with the presentation. If you have any questions. No questions? One question.
First of all, I would like to thank British Council. My interest in art is just as an audience. I have no specialty. However, I have specialty in accessibility. And I'd like to ask, in the previous session as well, we talked about digital access. How much have you seen in Istanbul? I don't know, but we have no architectural access. Everything that is being done is just for show off. Even among my architecture colleagues doing that, just like if you're disabled, it should be shoddy and not good or not of good quality. Unfortunately, my architecture colleagues also suffice with putting on a ramp. I wonder, this digital accessibility to art, for our country, would it be a disadvantage for us to take shelter in? There should be no disability, just like, how shall I say, within the scope of the disabled legislation, they can work out of home. And I don't think that's a very right thing. They should be socializing. Do we run such a risk? I wonder what you would say about this.
Everything has to be accessible. I don't think you can reduce access in one area and bring it up in another area. I think it has to be throughout. We also have to be realistic. So some people do experience extreme fatigue, and I think they have as much right to access art as anybody else. But that shouldn't stop transport, that shouldn't stop architecture, that shouldn't stop social support that also enables those people, when they can, to go out and take part in social life. That's absolutely incredibly important. So I don't think it's about increasing access in one area at the expense of another area. I think it's about looking at every single thing that we do and going, access to this is my responsibility. How can I make it more accessible for everybody?
Thank you. Başka soru var mı?
Other questions? I want to ask because I couldn't quite catch, I don't remember the name of the artist. The wheelchair at the bottom of the sea, and then the one who's planning to fly later on. In order to make that movie more accessible, you talked about having done something which I couldn't quite catch for those people who can't go to museums and stuff. How did you take it to them? Could you please elaborate? Thank you.
So the artist is Sue Austin, so Susan Austin. And what she did was to create a physical shape, a physical structure that was easy to transport. So she could take this structure to a small hall anywhere in the country and set it up so that people could see her work in 360. So they could enter the center of this space. It's actually a series of fabric strips with a huge kind of projector set up in the middle, and it's projected outwards. So you stand and you are surrounded by her swimming around you. But rather than having to go to an IMAX cinema in London to have that experience, you could have it within a village. You could have it literally anywhere. It can run off a power supply in a field. Because for her, it was about everybody should have that access, not just the people who go to galleries or the people who can afford to go to 360 screens.
You talked about disabled people doing things a lot better. And I totally agree with you. I have an explanation on my own for this, but I would like to hear that from you. Why do you think so?
Translation halfway through.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
I'm talking to a box.
That disabled people do things better. And I believe this proposition, and I have my own reasons, but I would like to hear your reasons and why you think that they do it better.
Okay, so why do I think disabled people do things better? I think that we're in an era where innovation is king. If you can do things differently, then you can often pick up on aspects that somebody else may have missed. Our standard way of doing things doesn't work anymore. It doesn't reach enough people, it alienates some, it creates divides between generations, and yet there's a whole system that is set on doing things one particular way. I think disabled people, we have grown up knowing that that's wrong. We've grown up being adaptable, being flexible, being chameleons, saying one thing to a doctor and another thing to a legislator in order to get our way through. So we're very clever at adapting situations, and we're very self-resilient. And I think all of those things, as entrepreneurs, mean that we can look at a situation and we can come up not just with one solution, but many solutions that we can then prototype and move forward. I also think that we're less boring. We've heard many, many white men of a certain age tell us their view of the world again and again and again. It's a view of the world that doesn't match my view. And I'm interested in hearing and part of a group of people who are sharing different views of the world. And I think there's now an appetite for that difference. But I'm interested to hear, particularly if we can, I'm interested in hearing your reason.
Çeviri var mı şu anda? Tamam.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear the translation? Can you hear the translation now? Hello, hello. Can you hear? Okay, okay. According to what I think, in fact, well, in a way, it's similar to what you've said. Different social structures. Sometimes I feel squeezed among them. I feel like I'm not adapted to them. I don't fit. Doesn't have to do, even if it has to do, it does not have to do with the disability directly. The perspectives, the wealth. Seeing all of that in such a brief presentation also showed me my own mental barriers on the one hand, because it's easier to have something external to overcome than to have something internal to overcome. Overcoming mental barriers is a lot more difficult than overcoming the external barriers, and disabled people, because it is something they constantly have to keep doing, they become masters of this. And yes, there is this barrier. Let me go through that way. Let me go circular. Let me look at it from this perspective, kind of. Because they have become masters of doing this, really, maybe this is what art needs the most, really, different perspectives. And that's why I think they do things better.
It's about a mindset the biggest barriers that any disabled people face, it's nothing to do with anything that's medical. It's nothing to do with what you can't do. The biggest barrier is the assumptions of other people and the assumptions that you cannot do things and the assumptions that, oh, it's too much, it's not good enough. There's nothing real there. And it's a mental shift for you, but then we have to make that mental shift for everybody in the world. And art is a brilliant communicator.
Teşekkürler.
Thank you.
I wanna hear more your criteria of high quality art. You mentioned a couple of times, and I find quite problematic in a way, like this as a definition.
High quality can be really problematic. What we define it as in relation to a specific art form or in relation to a specific type of work, the best of that type of work. So if we're funding a street artist whose aim is to get that work seen by a really wide range of people, then that's the definition of success that fits with that particular piece of work. If we're funding a piece of opera, then the criteria for high quality are very different for that piece of work. But we see our job as embedding people within the cultural sector. So whatever the art form definition of quality is, that's where we want to go in and push. But sometimes we have to subvert that. So within ballet, for example, is the definition of quality how high you can kick your leg? Or is the definition of quality the embodiment of an emotion through physicality on a stage? A disabled person, maybe with one leg, no legs, whatever, can do the second but couldn't do the first. So for us, it's about shifting definitions of quality so that they're about the impact of the work, which is what we believe art is about, rather than tick box or straitjacket definitions of quality, which only some people who might have had the right training or might have gone to the right schools. That's not what we mean by quality. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. Yeah.
İki soru, yani siz ve sizden sonra sanırım kapamamız gerekecek.
Only two more questions. My question is as follows. Why are we talking about digital art for the participation of the disabled? That's my master thesis, disabled people's participation in art, and there's still ground to cover. So, and when I talked to a friend of mine, they said British Council is going to have a meeting about this, about the development of such a solution and about the project, about a project being selected. And the project selected is VR. You put on the goggles to experience. And what that made me think, there's just nothing to do, and we just have digital art left available, and that's the only way we can art accessible. It's like a point of escape to me, or it is so impossible that there's only this. So the right for the disabled people to participate in art, this has not been thought about, but it's just whatever we can do, let's do it sort of thing. That's okay. As British Council, let me elaborate on that. No, that's not how it is. Digital is something we prefer to use globally as British Council because the cities where we are, we're trying to go over the borders. We want all of our projects to be accessible. Our examinations, for instance, IELTS, in everything that we do, we give priority to accessibility, and in art as well. Our global targets or our main headings, digital goes into the foreground. Reaching different people is important, and because digital is a good tool to be able to achieve that, when I mean reaching different people, I mean going outside of Beyoğlu, going outside of Istanbul is also included, not just reaching disabled people. So, because we're strong in digital, that's why we've started from digital. We're not using digital to reach disabled people. We're using digital to reach more people, and that accessibility criteria is now being applied to digital. I don't know if it's an answer for you exactly, but of course we can discuss this better. Yes, we'll discuss that.
It has to be access to everything. There's no point in saying, oh, we'll make this accessible, but actually the rest of it, no. If you don't make what you're doing accessible, you're saying, you're discriminating. You're saying to a particular group of people, you are not worthy of what it is I am doing. So I use captions all the time. I cannot watch film without captions. I don't hear enough. And if somebody wants me to see a film, they have to caption that film. Otherwise, they're choosing to see me as lesser. They're choosing to see me as someone they don't want to see their film. So every time you create something, if you don't make it accessible, you have made a choice to stop some people accessing your work. It's a deliberate choice now. There's no other excuses.
Okay, we'll talk. There was this one last question. Hello. I'm an art teacher. To high school and junior high, I teach art classes there. Thank you for introducing us to these artists and for what you have done for them, because really overcoming mental barriers is more difficult for a person. I experience this with my students. I just always advise them to discover themselves, discover their strengths, and I give examples from artists' lives so that they can make a connection with themselves. I'm going to definitely talk about these artists, and I'm going to encourage them even more. My request from you is, I'm sure it must be, but I would like to say it myself once. The links whereby we can reach you. Please, if you could share those on your website, then we'll research. She couldn't tell what happened. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Me, individually, how I can contribute, or all of us, how we can contribute individually to your studies. That's what I'd like to find out as well. Plus, there were cards you showed. I would love to see them. I'm so curious. Okay, in a little while, yes. Here they are. Here they are. Yes.
But in terms of how everybody can help amplify the work of disabled artists, I think social media is a great way of sharing and amplifying things. I think talking about examples, doing research. I would love every teacher to talk about disabled artists in the work that they do. If every teacher across the world did that, then disabled people would not have a barrier about entering the arts, because they would know it's possible. But sadly, we hear about dead white men. They're the artists we get to hear about. And that needs to change. We need to broaden the range of work that we're familiar with and the range of work we talk to others about. And the more of us who do that, the better.
Also, as British Council Turkey, you can always reach us as the art team or to any of our other units. We'd like to talk about what we can do together.
You mentioned you don't have funding after 2020. What do you expect to happen? This magical mental shift in arts institutions, that they will fund arts? disabled artists?
We were told very clearly, because originally we were told 2016 or 18, and then we were told 2020, and now they're going maybe another set. And I think maybe there should be one more kind of block, but at some point we have to stop, because it's not our job. It's not our job to make the arts world accessible and support disabled artists. It's the arts world's job to do that. And we can only be here for a time, otherwise everybody will leave it to us. And that's not the point. So time limited is really good, but it does take time to shift people's minds. And you know, we've found that. Judging when it's the right time to stop and go and do something else is an interesting and difficult thing. And it's the reason we're not an organisation. I believe that if you set up an organisation, the organisation starts to want to continue as an organisation. It starts to only think about the organisation. It stops thinking of the purpose and the change that you want to be. So for me, I would like Unlimited to continue as long as it is making change, but not too long that stops other people making change.
Thanks so much. It was a lovely panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all speakers and everybody who attended. As I said in the beginning, there were many activities today, and thank you so much for being here, this many of you, at this time of the day. Museums Without Walls will continue with more countries next year, at least 2 more countries outside of Turkey, and especially your interpretations, your support is very important. So we have a small survey. If you could fill it out while touring the exhibition, we'll be very happy. We'd like to stay in contact with you. Your ideas are important for us. Thank you again for being here. Now, we have a small cocktail at Pera Cafe. Let's go up there together and continue to speak.